The moment Ella Martinez saw her ex-husband smirk across the crowded nightclub, she knew running had been a mistake. 6 months of rebuilding herself, gone in an instant. His arm draped possessively around a woman who looked barely old enough to drink, Jake's eyes found hers with that same cruel satisfaction she remembered from their divorce proceedings. Her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. And she absolutely could not let him see her break down again. So Ella did the most reckless thing she'd done in her entire careful, controlled life. She walked straight toward a stranger whose presence made the entire room hold its breath. If you want to see how one desperate decision changed everything, stay until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The bass thundered through Ella's ribcage as she pushed deeper into the club, her best friend Maya's hand gripping her elbow like a lifeline. The music was too loud, the lights too bright, the crowd too thick with bodies that smelled of expensive cologne and cheaper decisions. Ella hated every second of it. "This was a terrible idea," she shouted over the pounding rhythm, trying to pull back toward the exit. Maya's perfectly manicured nails dug in harder. "You've said that 5 times since we got here. You're staying." "Maya, Ella Martinez, you have spent the last 6 months going from the hospital to your empty apartment and back again. You sleep 4 hours a night, you eat takeout over the sink, and last week I caught you crying in the supply closet because a patient's husband brought her flowers." Maya spun to face her, dark eyes fierce even in the strobing lights. "You're 29 years old and you're living like you're already dead. So no, we're not leaving." Ella wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that this, the pulsing music, the beautiful people, the whole performance of pretending to have fun, felt like wearing someone else's skin. She'd never been this person, even when she'd been married. Especially when she'd been married. Jake had preferred her small, forgettable, easy to manage. The thought of him sent a familiar ache through her chest, the kind that had become so constant she almost didn't notice it anymore. Almost. "One drink?" Ella conceded, her voice barely audible over the music. "Then I'm going home." Maya's victory smile was brilliant. "One drink, I promise." They were both lying, and they both knew it. The bar was a crush of bodies, 3 deep with people waving bills and shouting orders. Maya, who could command attention in a morgue, somehow caught the bartender's eye within seconds. Ella hung back, her nurse's instincts automatically cataloging everything wrong with the scene. The girl in heels too high for safe walking. The guy who definitely had 3 drinks past his limit, the general chaos that would inevitably end with someone in her emergency room by morning. She was just starting to calculate the likelihood of alcohol poisoning cases when she felt it. That prickling awareness that came from being watched. Ella turned slowly, scanning the crowd, and that's when she saw him. Jake. Her ex-husband stood near the VIP section, bathed in golden light that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Which, she thought bitterly, had always been his favorite look. He'd aged well in the 6 months since their divorce, or more likely, he'd finally had time to focus on himself instead of inventing new ways to make her feel inadequate. But it wasn't Jake that made her breath catch. It was the woman draped over him like expensive jewelry. She was young. God, she looked barely legal, with the kind of effortless beauty that came from good genes and better stylists. Her dress probably cost more than Ella's monthly rent. Her laugh, bright and careless, carried over the music as Jake whispered something in her ear, and then his eyes found Ella's. The recognition was instant. So was the satisfaction that spread across his face, slow and cruel as poison. He'd seen her. Worse, he'd seen her alone, without Maya, looking exactly like what she was. A divorced woman who'd come to a nightclub because her best friend had forced her, wearing a dress she'd bought on sale 3 years ago, completely and utterly out of place. Jake leaned down to whisper something to his girlfriend. The girl's gaze swung toward Ella, and even from across the room, Ella could see the pity in her eyes. The humiliation hit like a physical blow. "Ella?" Maya appeared at her elbow, 2 drinks in hand. "You okay? You look like you're going to be sick." "He's here." The words came out strangled. Maya followed her gaze, and Ella watched her best friend's expression shift from concern to fury in half a heartbeat. "That asshole, don't look at him. We're leaving." But it was too late. Jake was already moving toward them, the girl on his arm, that same smug smile Ella remembered from every argument they'd ever had, the one that said he had already won, and they both knew it. Panic clawed at Ella's throat. She couldn't do this, couldn't stand here and make small talk, couldn't pretend she was fine while he paraded his new relationship in front of her like a trophy. couldn't give him the satisfaction of watching her crumble. Her eyes swept the club desperately, looking for an exit, an escape, anything, and landed on a man sitting alone in a curved booth near the back. Even in the chaos of the club, he was an island of stillness. He sat with the kind of relaxed confidence that suggested he owned the place, or could, if he wanted to. Dark hair, dark suit, dark eyes that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. There was something about the way he held himself, the subtle authority in the set of his shoulders, that made the people around him unconsciously give him space, as if they could sense something dangerous underneath the expensive tailoring. Ella didn't think. She just moved. "What are you doing?" Maya hissed, but Ella was already pulling away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had no plan, no idea what she was going to say. She just knew that Jake was 30 seconds behind her, and if she didn't do something bold, something reckless, something completely unlike herself, she was going to spend the rest of the night watching him gloat. The stranger looked up as she approached, and Ella felt the full weight of his attention settle on her like a physical thing. Up close, he was even more striking, sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled, eyes that missed nothing, eyes that were currently studying her with an intensity that should have been terrifying. "I'm sorry," Ella said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know this is insane, but could you possibly—" She faltered. This was crazy. This was beyond crazy. She was about to ask a complete stranger to pretend to be her date just to avoid a humiliating conversation with her ex-husband. The man tilted his head slightly, waiting. There was something almost predatory in the gesture, like a wolf deciding whether you were prey or something more interesting. "Would you dance with me?" The words came out before she could stop them. "Please, I need someone to think I'm not alone. Just for a minute." For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Ella's cheeks burned. "I'm sorry, this was stupid. Who are we trying to make jealous?" His voice was low, cultured, with the faintest trace of an accent she couldn't quite place. "My ex-husband." The admission felt like defeat. "He's here with his new girlfriend, and I can't let him see me alone. I can't give him that." Something shifted in the stranger's expression. Not quite sympathy, she got the feeling this man didn't do sympathy, but a kind of understanding that felt almost worse. "I see." He stood in one fluid movement, and Ella realized with a start that he was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that made the already generous booth seem small. "What's your name?" "Ella. Ella Martinez." "Daniel Vega." He offered his hand, and when she took it, his grip was warm and firm and somehow steadying. "It's nice to meet you, Ella Martinez." Then he smiled, and it transformed his entire face. It wasn't a kind smile exactly, but it was real, and it reached his eyes, and it made something in Ella's chest unclench just slightly. "Let's give your ex-husband something to think about." He led her onto the dance floor with a confidence that suggested he did this sort of thing regularly. Which, Ella thought with a spike of anxiety, he probably did. A man who looked like that, carried himself like that, probably had women approaching him every night. The thought made her feel even more pathetic. "Relax," Daniel murmured, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath against her ear. His hand settled at the small of her back, proprietary and protective at once. "You're supposed to be having fun, remember?" "I'm not good at this," Ella admitted, her body stiff and awkward in his arms. "At dancing? At pretending." Daniel's hand tightened slightly at her waist, pulling her infinitesimally closer. To anyone watching, it would look intimate, possessive, exactly what she needed. "Then don't pretend," he said quietly. "Just follow my lead." The music shifted to something slower, more sensual, and Daniel moved with an easy grace that suggested expensive lessons or natural talent, probably both. Ella tried to match his rhythm, hyper-aware of every point where their bodies touched, his hand at her back, her palm against his shoulder, the heat radiating through his suit jacket. "Is he watching?" she asked, not daring to look. "Very much so." There was a hint of amusement in Daniel's voice. "And he doesn't look happy about it." "Good." The word came out more vicious than she'd intended. Daniel made a sound that might have been a laugh. What did he do to earn this level of anger? Besides the affair, the gaslighting, and stealing $40,000 from our joint account 3 days before our divorce was finalized. Ella heard the bitterness in her own voice and hated it. Sorry, you didn't ask for my life story. No, Daniel agreed, but I'm interested anyway. Ella risked looking up at him and found those dark eyes watching her with genuine curiosity. Not pity, not judgment, just interest. We were married for 5 years, she found herself saying. I put him through law school while working double shifts at the hospital. We had a plan. I'd support him through school, then when he was established, I'd go back and finish my advanced medical training, become a critical care specialist like I'd always wanted. Let me guess, Daniel said dryly. He became established and the plan changed. The plan evaporated. Suddenly my dreams were unrealistic and selfish. He needed me focused on supporting his career, not chasing my own. And she swallowed hard. I believed him. For 5 years I believed I was asking for too much. And the affair? His paralegal, 23 years old and very impressed by his new corner office. Ella laughed, but it came out hollow. I found out when she accidentally sent me an email meant for him. Very detailed, very explicit. Daniel's expression didn't change, but Ella felt the subtle tension that ran through his frame. And the money? He cleaned out our savings 3 days before the divorce was final, claimed it was payment for the emotional distress I'd caused by abandoning our marriage. His lawyer tied it up so thoroughly that by the time I could fight it, I'd already lost everything trying to pay for my own legal fees. Your lawyer was incompetent. It wasn't a question, but Ella nodded anyway. I couldn't afford anyone better. Jake made sure of that too. They swayed in silence for a moment, and Ella became aware that other couples were giving them a wide berth. Not obviously, but there was definitely a bubble of space around them that hadn't been there before. He's approaching, Daniel said calmly. Your ex-husband. Would you like me to send him away? Ella's first instinct was to say yes, to let the stranger handle the confrontation she'd been dreading, but something in Daniel's tone, the absolute certainty that he could send Jake away, made her pause. No, she said quietly. I should face him. Should, Daniel repeated, that hint of amusement back in his voice. Interesting word choice. What would you choose? I'd let me handle it. His hand flexed against her back. But I suspect you're not the type to hide behind someone else. He was right, Ella realized. Even after everything Jake had put her through, even after all the ways he'd made her small and afraid, she wasn't that person. Not anymore. Ella? Jake's voice cut through the music, smooth and familiar and still capable of making her stomach clench. Didn't expect to see you here. She turned in Daniel's arms, keeping his hand at her waist like an anchor. Jake stood 3 feet away, the young girlfriend hovering uncertainly behind him. Up close, Ella could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he was already trying to figure out how to spin this encounter to his advantage. Jake, she kept her voice level, detached. Enjoying your evening? His gaze flicked to Daniel, and Ella watched something like uncertainty cross his face. It was so unfamiliar that it took her a moment to recognize it. Jake, unsure of himself. Jake, slightly off balance. I see you've moved on, Jake said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. That was fast. 6 months isn't fast, Ella said quietly. 6 months is how long you waited before cleaning out our bank account. Jake's smile tightened. Are you still on about that? I thought we'd settled everything. We settled what your lawyer would let us settle. There's a difference. Ella? He reached for her arm and Ella flinched back instinctively. Daniel moved. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't grab Jake or throw a punch or do any of the things Ella might have expected. He simply shifted his position, placing himself partially between Ella and her ex-husband, and the temperature in their little bubble of space seemed to drop 10 degrees. I don't believe we've been introduced, Daniel said, his voice perfectly polite and absolutely terrifying. Daniel Vega. He didn't offer his hand. Jake stared at him, and Ella watched her ex-husband's expression cycle through confusion, irritation, and then, unexpectedly, something that looked almost like recognition or fear. Maybe both. Jake Martinez, her ex-husband said slowly. Ella's former husband, Daniel finished. Yes. She mentioned you. The way he said it, flat, dismissive, like Jake was a minor inconvenience already forgotten, made Ella want to laugh and cry at the same time. Jake's jaw tightened. Listen, I don't know who you think you are. I know exactly who I am, Daniel interrupted, still in that same pleasant, terrifying tone. The question is whether you do. There was a beat of silence. Jake's girlfriend shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between the three of them, like she was watching a play she didn't understand. "Babe," she said quietly, tugging on Jake's sleeve. "Maybe we should—" "We're not done here," Jake snapped, not taking his eyes off Daniel. "I think you are." Daniel's hand settled more firmly at Ella's waist, a gesture of possession that should have annoyed her but instead made her feel oddly protected. "Ms. Martinez has been very clear about having moved on. I suggest you do the same. This is a private conversation. In a public club with my date." Daniel's smile was all teeth and no warmth, which makes it very much my business. Ella could see the exact moment Jake recognized he was outmatched. It was in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides. He'd always been like this when he was losing an argument, trying to decide whether to escalate or retreat. "You have no idea what you're getting into," Jake said, directing the words at Daniel but keeping his eyes on Ella. "She's not what she seems. Underneath all that sweet, caring nurse act, she's cold, selfish. She'll drag you down just like she did me." The words hit exactly where he'd intended. Ella felt them land like physical blows, each one confirming every terrible thing she'd spent 6 months trying not to believe about herself. "Is that what you tell yourself?" Daniel's voice was soft now, almost conversational. "That's how you justify taking her money, her time, her dreams? By convincing yourself she's the selfish one?" "You don't know anything about our marriage. I know enough." Daniel's eyes had gone flat and cold. "I know that a man who truly loved his wife wouldn't drain their joint account the moment she could no longer serve his purposes. I know that a man with any integrity wouldn't parade his infidelity in front of the woman who put him through law school, and I know—" His voice dropped even lower, taking on an edge that made the hair on the back of Ella's neck stand up. "That a man with any sense of self-preservation would walk away from this conversation right now." Jake went very still. "Is that a threat?" "It's a suggestion," Daniel said mildly. "Though I understand how someone of your limited experience might confuse the two." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Ella could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, could see the rage building in Jake's expression. She knew that look, knew what came after. He was going to make a scene, was going to say something cutting and horrible, was going to— "Come on, babe." The girlfriend— Ella realized she didn't even know the girl's name, pulled more insistently on Jake's arm. "This is boring. Let's go get another drink." Jake hesitated, his pride clearly warring with his common sense. Ella watched the internal battle play out across his face and knew the moment common sense won. It always did with Jake, eventually. He was a bully, but he was a smart bully. He knew when to retreat. "This isn't over," he said, directing the words at Ella, but keeping a wary eye on Daniel. "Yes," Daniel said simply. "It is." Jake opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and stalked away with his girlfriend in tow. Ella watched him disappear into the crowd, feeling like something had just happened that she didn't entirely understand. "Are you all right?" Daniel's voice was gentle again, the hard edge completely gone. Ella realized she was shaking. "Yes, I think so. Thank you for that. You didn't have to—" "Yes," Daniel said, echoing his earlier statement. "I did." "Why?" The question came out more plaintive than she'd intended. "You don't even know me." Daniel studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. "No," he agreed. "But I'd like to." Before Ella could process that statement, Maya appeared at her elbow, eyes wide with concern and barely suppressed excitement. "Ella, are you okay? I saw Jake and I was about to come over, but then you were dancing with—" She trailed off, finally seeming to notice Daniel. Her eyebrows rose. "Oh, hi." "Maya, this is Daniel Vega," Ella said, still feeling off balance. "Daniel, my best friend Maya Chen." "A pleasure," Daniel said, inclining his head. To Maya's credit, she only stared at him for a few seconds before recovering her composure. "Right. Yes. Pleasure." She turned back to Ella. "Are you sure you're okay? Because we can leave right now if you want." "She's fine," Daniel said, before Ella could answer. "But perhaps some air would be good. If you'll excuse us." He was already guiding Ella toward the club's back exit, one hand still at her waist. Maya made a series of exaggerated facial expressions behind his back, that Ella interpreted as, "Oh my God, who is this man? And you better text me immediately." The night air hit like a blessing after the stifling heat of the club. They were in some kind of VIP courtyard, Ella realized, tastefully lit, with comfortable seating and the music reduced to a distant thump. A few other couples occupied the space, but they were far enough away to provide the illusion of privacy. Daniel guided her to a bench and waited until she sat before settling beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I'm sorry," Ella said after a moment. "I shouldn't have put you in that position. That was completely unfair of me." "You asked me to dance," Daniel said mildly. "I chose to do the rest." "You threatened my ex-husband." "I made a suggestion." That sounded a lot like a threat. Daniel's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Then I suppose it's fortunate that I never actually threatened him." Ella found herself smiling back despite everything. "You're either very kind or very dangerous. I assure you, I'm both." The way he said it, completely serious, without a trace of humor, should have frightened her. Instead, Ella felt an odd sort of relief. She'd spent 5 years with a man who'd pretended to be harmless while slowly destroying her from the inside. There was something almost refreshing about someone who was upfront about their capacity for damage. "Why did he look at you like that?" she asked. "Jake, when you introduced yourself, like he recognized your name." "Did he?" Daniel's expression gave nothing away. "Don't do that. Don't pretend you didn't notice." "You're very perceptive." He studied her for a moment. "Your ex-husband is a lawyer. I imagine he's familiar with certain prominent families in this city." "And you're from one of these prominent families?" "Something like that." Ella waited for him to elaborate. When he didn't, she felt a flutter of unease. "What kind of prominent?" "The kind that makes lawyers nervous." Daniel's tone was light, but there was steel underneath. "Does that bother you?" It should have, Ella thought. Any sane person would be bothered by the implication that she'd just asked a dangerous man to help her humiliate her ex-husband. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "Ask me again when I'm not running on adrenaline and wounded pride." Daniel laughed, a real laugh this time, warm and genuine. "Fair enough." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the sounds of the city filtering in around them. Ella felt the tension slowly draining from her shoulders, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that went beyond just physical tiredness. "I should go home," she said finally. "Maya's probably terrified I've been kidnapped." "Probably," Daniel agreed. He stood and offered his hand. "May I see you again?" Ella looked up at him, this stranger who'd defended her to her ex-husband, who'd held her while she danced, who'd somehow made her feel safe and off balance in equal measure. "Why would you want to?" The question came out before she could stop it. "I'm a divorced nurse with more baggage than a 747. You could have literally anyone." "I don't want anyone." Daniel's hand remained extended, steady and patient. "I want to have dinner with a woman who put her husband through law school and then had the strength to walk away when he betrayed her. I want to know what kind of person works double shifts in an emergency room and still has compassion left for strangers in nightclubs. He paused. "I want to see you again, Ella Martinez, if you'll let me." It was too much, too intense, too fast. They'd known each other less than an hour, most of which had been a performance for Jake's benefit. She should say no, should thank him politely, and go home and forget this entire surreal evening. "Tomorrow," she heard herself say. "I have the night shift, but I'm free for lunch." Daniel's smile was slow and devastating. "Tomorrow, then. Give me your number." She did, watching as he entered it into a phone that probably cost more than her monthly salary. When he looked up, there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. "Get home safely, Ella." "I will." He walked her back inside, where Maya practically dragged her away with a flurry of barely coherent questions. As they made their way to the exit, Ella couldn't help looking back. Daniel stood exactly where she'd left him, watching her go with those dark, unreadable eyes. He raised one hand in farewell, and Ella felt something shift in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. She didn't know it then, but that moment, that single impulsive decision to ask a stranger for a dance, would change everything. The question was whether the change would save her or destroy her. She supposed she'd find out tomorrow. Ella didn't sleep that night. She tried, lay in bed staring at her ceiling while her mind replayed every moment of the evening on an endless loop. The weight of Daniel's hand at her waist, the cold fury in his voice when he'd faced down Jake, the way he'd looked at her when he'd asked to see her again, like she was something worth seeing. At 4 in the morning, she gave up and made coffee. sitting at her tiny kitchen table while the city slowly woke up outside her window. Her phone sat in front of her, silent and accusing. Maya had texted 17 times before finally giving up around 2 a.m., each message more elaborate than the last in its demands for information. Ella had answered none of them. What would she even say? That she'd asked a stranger to dance and somehow ended up with a lunch date with a man who'd made her ex-husband look genuinely afraid? That for the first time in 6 months, she'd felt something other than tired and hollow and small? That she had absolutely no idea what she was doing? Her phone buzzed, making her jump. Unknown number. For a moment she considered not answering, but nurses didn't have that luxury. Too many late-night calls from the hospital, too many emergencies that couldn't wait. Hello? Good morning, Ella. Daniel's voice was warm and alert, no trace of the late hour they'd both kept. I hope I didn't wake you. No, She glanced at the clock, 5:15 a.m. Do you always call people this early? Only when I suspect they're already awake. There was a smile in his voice. You strike me as someone who doesn't sleep well after eventful evenings. He wasn't wrong, which was somehow more unsettling than if he'd woken her. Is there a reason you're calling at 5 in the morning? Lunch. I realized I never asked what you like to eat. Ella blinked at her coffee mug. You're calling at 5 a.m. to ask about my food preferences? Is that strange? Most people would text. I'm not most people. He said it matter-of-factly, without arrogance, just stating a truth they both already knew. So, food preferences? Despite everything, the exhaustion, the confusion, the slight edge of fear that came with not knowing who Daniel Vega actually was, Ella found herself smiling. I'm not picky. Whatever you choose will be fine. That's not an answer. That's avoidance. Maybe I'm testing to see if you actually want to know me, or if you just want to impress me. Daniel laughed, and the sound did something warm and dangerous to Ella's chest. Clever. All right, I'll surprise you. But I want to know something else. What? Why nursing? His tone shifted, becoming genuinely curious. You mentioned wanting to be a critical care specialist. Why that specifically? Ella wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. It was a question no one had asked her in years. Not Jake, not her parents, not even Maya. They all assumed they knew the answer. Noble calling, desire to help people, all the standard explanations people gave for choosing medicine. The truth was more complicated. When I was 16, my younger brother had a car accident, she said quietly. He was in the ICU for 3 weeks. Critical condition, uncertain prognosis, the whole nightmare. And there was this nurse, Christine her name was. She worked nights, and she'd sit with my parents when I had to go to school. She explained everything the doctor said in words we could understand. She held my mother when Mom fell apart. She taught me how to talk to my brother even though he was unconscious, told me it mattered, that he could hear us. He survived, Daniel said. It wasn't a question. He did. Fully recovered, actually. He's a high school teacher now in Oregon, married with 2 kids. Ella smiled at the memory. But those 3 weeks changed me. I saw what it meant to be present for people during the worst moments of their lives. Not just medically competent, but present. That's what I wanted to do. And critical care? Because that's where people need it most. When everything's falling apart and the seconds matter and there's no room for error, that's when I feel most alive, most useful. She paused. Jake never understood that. He thought I wanted the prestige or the money or something he could quantify, but it was never about that. No, Daniel agreed. I don't imagine it was. They were quiet for a moment, and Ella realized she was having the most intimate conversation she'd had in months with a man she'd met less than 12 hours ago. I should let you go, Daniel said finally. I'm sure you have things to do before our lunch. Like sleep? Like sleep, he agreed, amusement threading through his voice. I'll pick you up at noon. Text me your address. I can meet you somewhere. Ella. Just her name spoken in that low, certain tone. Text me your address. She should have argued. Should have insisted on meeting him somewhere public, somewhere safe. All the rules about dating strangers that Maya had drilled into her over the years were screaming warnings in the back of her mind. But there was something about the way Daniel said her name. Not controlling, not demanding, just sure. Like he knew she'd agree because he knew it was the right thing, the safe thing, even if it didn't feel like it. Okay, she heard herself say. Noon. After he hung up, Ella sat staring at her phone for a long moment before finally texting Maya. "I'm alive. Having lunch with him today. We'll explain everything after." Maya's response came within seconds. "You better." The morning passed in a blur of nervous energy. Ella tried on 6 different outfits before settling on a simple navy dress that made her feel competent without trying too hard. She'd worked enough night shifts to know how to function on minimal sleep, but her hand still shook slightly as she applied mascara. This was insane. She was going to lunch with a man she knew almost nothing about, who'd threatened her ex-husband without actually making a threat, who called at 5 a.m. like it was a perfectly normal thing to do, a man who'd looked at her like she mattered. At 11:55, Ella's doorbell rang. She opened it to find Daniel standing in her hallway, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. Somehow he made her modest apartment building's dingy corridor look like a luxury hotel lobby just by existing in it. "You're early," she said. "I'm prompt." His eyes traveled over her, something warm flickering in their depths. "You look beautiful." Ella felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. You look dangerous, powerful, like everything her practical nurse's brain was telling her to run from." "Very nice." His mouth quirked. "I'll take it, shall we?" The car waiting at the curb was exactly what Ella had expected, and somehow still surprising, sleek, black, expensive enough that she was afraid to touch it. Daniel opened the passenger door for her with the kind of casual chivalry that suggested it was habit rather than performance. "Where are we going?" she asked as he pulled into traffic. "Somewhere quiet, where we can talk without being interrupted." That should have sounded ominous. Instead, it just sounded nice. After the chaos of the club, after Jake's confrontation, the idea of somewhere quiet held enormous appeal. They drove through the city in comfortable silence, and Ella found herself watching Daniel from the corner of her eye. In daylight, he was no less striking than he'd been in the club's strobing lights. But there was something else, too. A tiredness around his eyes that suggested he'd slept as poorly as she had. A tension in his shoulders that seemed at odds with his relaxed grip on the steering wheel. "You can ask," he said without looking at her. "Ask what?" "Whatever you're thinking so loudly it's practically audible." Ella felt her lips twitch despite her nervousness. "How do you know I'm thinking anything?" "Because you're intelligent, and you invited a stranger into your life yesterday. If you weren't thinking about it, I'd be concerned about your judgment." "Maybe my judgment is already questionable," Ella pointed out. "I did marry Jake. You were young, and from what you've told me, he was very good at making you doubt yourself." Daniel's hands tightened fractionally on the wheel. "That's not poor judgment, that's being human." The gentleness in his voice caught her off guard. Ella looked out the window, watching the city slide by, gathering her courage. "Who are you, Daniel Vega?" "That's a complicated question." "Then give me the simple answer." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "I come from a family with significant influence in this city. We have business interests that span several industries: real estate, import-export, private security. Some of those interests operate in gray areas that make people like your ex-husband nervous." "Gray areas?" Ella repeated. "Legal, but not always conventional." "And that's the simple answer?" "The complicated one would take considerably longer than our drive." He glanced at her, those dark eyes unreadable. "Does it frighten you?" Ella considered the question honestly. She should be frightened. Everything about this situation should be sending her running in the opposite direction. But sitting here in this quiet car with this dangerous man, she felt oddly safe. "I don't know yet," she said finally. "I think I need to understand more about what gray areas means." "Fair enough." Daniel pulled into the parking lot of what looked like a small Italian restaurant, tucked away on a quiet street Ella had never noticed before. "But first, lunch. I promise the food will be considerably less complicated than the conversation." The restaurant was exactly as advertised, small, elegant, with maybe a dozen tables scattered throughout a warmly lit space. A woman in her 60s appeared the moment they walked in, her face breaking into a genuine smile when she saw Daniel. "Daniel, it's been too long." She pulled him into a brief hug before turning to Ella with open curiosity. "And you've brought a guest. How wonderful." "Maria, this is Ella Martinez." "Ella, Maria Romano. She and her husband own this place." "It's lovely to meet you," Ella said, shaking the woman's hand. "Oh, the pleasure is mine." Maria's eyes sparkled with something that looked like mischief. Daniel never brings anyone here. You must be very special. Maria, Daniel said, a warning in his tone. What? I'm just stating facts. But she winked at Ella and led them to a corner table set slightly apart from the others. I'll send Antonio out with his recommendations. Welcome, dear. As she walked away, Ella raised an eyebrow at Daniel. You never bring anyone here? It's not that kind of place. He held out her chair, waiting until she sat before settling across from her. This is where I come when I need to think, or when I need to remind myself that not everything in this city is a transaction. And you brought me here on our first date. Is that what this is? His eyes held hers. A date? Isn't it? I wasn't sure you'd see it that way, given the circumstances of how we met. Ella thought about that. He was right. Their entire interaction so far had been born from her desperation to avoid humiliation. For all she knew, Daniel was just being kind to a woman who'd asked a stranger for help. But then she remembered the way he'd looked at her when he'd asked to see her again, the certainty in his voice when he'd said he wanted to know her. Yes, she said quietly. I think it's a date. Daniel's smile was slow and genuine and did dangerous things to her equilibrium. Good. Maria's husband Antonio appeared with a bottle of wine and a stream of rapid-fire Italian that made Daniel laugh and respond in kind. Ella listened to the musical flow of words, watching Daniel's whole demeanor shift. Here, in this small restaurant with these people who clearly cared about him, he seemed younger, less guarded, more human. Antonio wants to know if you trust me to order for you, Daniel translated, still smiling. Should I? Absolutely not. I'll order all your least favorite foods just to be difficult. In that case, I absolutely trust you. Ella grinned. Do your worst. What followed was one of the best meals Ella had ever eaten, homemade pasta with a sauce that tasted like summer, bread so fresh it was still warm, vegetables that had probably been picked that morning. Antonio appeared periodically to ensure they approved, each time looking more delighted with their reactions. This is incredible, Ella said around a bite of what Daniel had called braciole. How did you find this place? Maria's husband used to work for my father. When he retired, they opened this restaurant. I helped with the initial investment. He said it casually, like it was nothing. They refuse to let me pay for meals now, which drives me crazy. Because I don't like being in anyone's debt. Even for kindness? Especially for kindness. Daniel's expression grew serious. In my world, kindness usually comes with strings attached. But not here. No. Not here. He poured more wine into both their glasses. This is one of the few places in the city where I can be just Daniel, not a Vega, not someone people fear or want things from, just myself. Ella studied him across the table, this complicated man who'd walked into her life less than 24 hours ago. Is it lonely, being a Vega? Yes, he said simply, very much so. The honesty in his voice made something ache in Ella's chest. She reached across the table without thinking, covering his hand with hers. His skin was warm, his fingers strong as they turned to lace through hers. Tell me about the gray areas, she said softly. Daniel looked at their joined hands for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured, careful. My family's businesses are legitimate. I want to be clear about that. We don't deal in drugs, we don't traffic people, we don't operate outside the law in ways that harm innocents. He paused. But we operate at the edges of it. We provide services that exist in legal gray zones, protection, information, connections. We have relationships with people and organizations that more conventional businesses avoid. Protection from what? From whatever threatens our clients' interests. Sometimes that's corporate espionage, sometimes it's physical threats, sometimes it's simply knowing the right people to solve problems that can't be solved through official channels. Ella absorbed this, trying to reconcile it with the man sitting across from her. And the import-export business? Exactly what it sounds like. We move goods through ports and across borders. Everything legal, everything documented. But we're very good at navigating complex regulations and customs requirements that would stymie other companies. Because you have connections. Because we've spent 3 generations building relationships with everyone from customs officials to shipping company executives. We're not breaking laws. We're just very, very good at understanding how to work within them. It should have bothered her more than it did. Ella knew that. But there was something about Daniel's complete honesty, his refusal to sugarcoat or justify, that felt more trustworthy than any reassurance would have been. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "You barely know me. I could, I don't know, report you to someone." "Report what? That I admitted to having excellent business connections?" Daniel's mouth quirked. "But to answer your real question, I'm telling you because you deserve to know what you're getting into. If you decide you want to see me again after today, I need you to make that choice with full information. And if I decide I don't want to see you again?" Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment maybe, or resignation. "Then I thank you for your honesty and for a lovely lunch, and I leave you alone." "Just like that?" "Just like that." He squeezed her hand gently. "I won't lie to you, Ella. I won't pretend to be something I'm not, or promise you a simple life. But I also won't force my presence on you if it's not what you want." Ella looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between his expensive watch and her practical nurse's timepiece. They were from completely different worlds. He was dangerous and complicated and probably more trouble than any sane woman would willingly invite into her life. And yet, "What did you mean last night?" she asked. "When you told Jake you knew exactly who you are." Daniel's expression grew thoughtful. "I meant that I'm not ashamed of what I do or where I come from. My family's business may operate in gray areas, but we have a code. We protect people who can't protect themselves. We solve problems others can't solve. And we never, never prey on the vulnerable or the innocent." "Is that why you helped me? Because I was vulnerable?" "I helped you because you asked, and because any man who would drain his wife's bank account during a divorce deserves to be reminded that actions have consequences." His thumb traced slow circles on the back of her hand. "But I kept your number because you're brave and kind, and you put yourself through nursing school while working double shifts. Because you turned pain into purpose instead of bitterness. Because, when you look at me, you're cautious but not afraid." "Maybe I should be afraid." "Maybe," Daniel agreed, "but I don't think you are." He was right. Ella searched herself for fear and found only curiosity, attraction, and a strange sense of recognition, like some part of her had been waiting for someone who wouldn't be intimidated by her strength or put off by her scars. "I want to see you again," she said quietly. The relief that crossed Daniel's face was almost comical in its intensity. "You're sure?" "No, not even a little bit," Ella laughed shakily. "This is probably the second most impulsive decision I've made in my life." "What was the first?" "Asking you to dance." Daniel stood, still holding her hand, and pulled her gently to her feet. "Then let's see if your impulsive decisions are as good as I think they are." He kissed her there in Maria's restaurant, soft and sweet and utterly devastating. Ella felt her breath catch, felt the world narrow down to just this moment, his mouth on hers, his hand cupping her cheek, the quiet certainty that something fundamental had just shifted in her life. When they pulled apart, Maria was watching from across the room with undisguised delight. "Oh, you two are in so much trouble," she called out cheerfully. Daniel laughed, the sound free and genuine. "We know, Maria, we know." They stayed at the restaurant for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. Daniel wanted to know about her work, so Ella told him stories from the ER, the miraculous saves and the heartbreaking losses, the absurd things people did that landed them in her care. He listened with complete focus, asking questions that proved he was actually paying attention, not just being polite. In turn, he told her about growing up as a Vega, the pressure, the expectations, the strange duality of being both privileged and isolated. He spoke about his father with respect but not warmth, his mother with a gentleness that made Ella's heart ache. "She died when I was 19, he said quietly. "Cancer. It was fast. 3 months from diagnosis to the end. She made me promise I'd finish college, that I wouldn't let my father pull me into the business until I'd lived a little first." "Did you keep your promise?" "For 2 years. Then my father had a heart attack, and there was no one else to step in." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I've been running things ever since. How old are you now?" 34. You?" 29. Ella smiled faintly, "though some days I feel about 60. "The ER will do that." He checked his watch and grimaced. "I hate to do this, but I have a meeting at 3 that I can't reschedule." Disappointment flickered through her stronger than it should have been. "Of course. I understand. Can I see you tonight? After your shift?" "My shift ends at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning." "Then tomorrow morning. I'll bring breakfast to your apartment. Ella laughed. You don't have to. I want to. He stood and helped her with her chair. Besides, I need to make sure you actually eat something. You barely touched lunch. I was nervous. I noticed. His smile was gentle. Were you also nervous when you kissed me back? Heat flooded her cheeks. That's different. How? Food is complicated. Kissing is simple. Ella Martinez, nothing about kissing you is simple. But he was grinning as he said it, looking younger and lighter than she'd yet seen him. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, comfortable in a way that suggested they'd done this dozens of times before. When they arrived, Daniel walked her to her door despite her protests. Thank you, Ella said, suddenly feeling shy. For lunch. For everything. Thank you for taking a chance on me. He kissed her forehead, chaste and sweet. Get some sleep before your shift. I'll see you in the morning. She watched him walk away, then let herself into her apartment and immediately called Maya. Tell me everything, Maya demanded before Ella could even say hello. And I mean everything. Who is he? What does he do? Why did Jake look like he'd seen a ghost? Did you sleep with him? Are you going to sleep with him? Should I be worried? Maya, breathe. I'll breathe when you explain why you're dating someone who made Jake Martinez look scared. So Ella told her, most of it, anyway. The parts about Daniel's family business she kept vague, not because she was trying to hide anything, but because she wasn't entirely sure how to explain it herself. So he's rich, powerful, possibly dangerous, and completely into you, Maya summarized when Ella finished. And you're going to see him again. Yes. Ella, I know what you're going to say. That this is too fast, too risky, too much like a bad decision. And you're probably right. But Maya, Ella's voice caught. I haven't felt this alive in years, maybe ever. And I know that's terrifying, but I think I need to see where this goes. There was a long pause. Then Maya sighed. Okay, but I'm meeting him. Soon. And if I get even the slightest bad vibe, I'm staging an intervention. Deal. The night shift was brutal. 3 car accidents, 2 cardiac arrests, and a shooting that kept Ella in surgery assisting for 4 hours straight. By the time she clocked out at 7:15, she was covered in other people's blood and so tired she could barely see straight. And Daniel was waiting in the parking lot. He leaned against his car, 2 coffee cups in hand, looking utterly out of place among the tired medical staff heading home. When he saw her, his expression shifted from patient to concerned in an instant. Bad night, he said. It wasn't a question. 3 saves, 2 losses. Ella took the coffee he offered, nearly moaning at the first sip. How long have you been waiting? About an hour? I figured shift changes could run long. He studied her face. Have you eaten? No time. Then we're stopping for food before I take you home. Daniel, I'm disgusting. I need a shower and about 12 hours of sleep. You need food first, sleep second, shower whenever you want. His tone left no room for argument. Get in the car, Ella. She was too tired to fight. Too tired to do anything but collapse into the passenger seat and let him drive. He took them to a diner she'd passed 1,000 times but never stopped at, walked her inside despite the fact that she was still in her scrubs and probably smelled like the ER. The waitress took one look at Ella and brought orange juice without being asked. Rough shift, honey? Something like that. I'll put your order in first. You look like you're about to fall over. When she left, Ella looked at Daniel across the worn Formica table. You don't have to do this. Do what? Take care of me. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I know you are. His eyes were gentle. But that doesn't mean you should have to. Not all the time. Something in Ella's chest cracked open at that. She'd spent so long being strong, being capable, being the one who held everything together. Having someone offer to share that burden, even temporarily, felt dangerously close to breaking her. Tell me about the saves, Daniel said quietly. So she did. Told him about the teenager who'd walked away from a car accident that should have killed him, about the heart attack patient they'd shocked back to life 3 times before he stabilized. She didn't tell him about the losses. Couldn't. Not yet. Not while they were still so fresh. The food arrived, and Ella ate without tasting it, fueled by exhaustion and muscle memory. Daniel watched her the entire time, his expression unreadable. What? She finally asked. I'm trying to figure out how someone survives doing this every day. Holding people's lives in your hands, carrying the weight of the ones you can't save. You get used to it. No, Daniel said softly. You don't. You just get better at carrying the weight. He was right, and the fact that he understood made Ella want to cry and laugh at the same time. Daniel drove her home, walked her to her door again despite her protests. This time, when he kissed her goodbye, it was deeper, slower, a promise of things to come. Sleep, he murmured against her mouth. I'll call you tonight. You don't have to. Ella, I'm going to call you tonight, and tomorrow, and probably the day after that. You might as well accept it now. She laughed, exhausted and giddy and completely overwhelmed. Okay. Okay, he echoed, smiling, then more seriously. Thank you. For what? For trusting me, for giving me a chance, for being exactly who you are. He left before she could respond, and Ella let herself into her apartment feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She'd asked a stranger to dance 3 nights ago. Now that stranger was bringing her coffee after night shifts and kissing her like she was precious. Ella had no idea what she'd gotten herself into. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she couldn't wait to find out. 3 weeks later, Ella was standing in her apartment kitchen trying to figure out how her life had become unrecognizable when her phone rang. Not Daniel's number, Jake's. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her stomach clenching with old, familiar anxiety. They hadn't spoken since the nightclub, hadn't needed to. The divorce was final, the papers signed, the assets divided as unfairly as his lawyer had managed to make them. There was no reason for him to call unless he wanted something, or unless something was wrong. Her nurse's instincts won out over her self-preservation. Hello? Ella. Jake's voice sounded strange, tight, almost frightened. I need to talk to you. It's important. We don't have anything to talk about. Please. The word came out desperate, so unlike the confident, condescending man she'd been married to that Ella actually paused. I'm serious. This is... I need to see you, today, now, if possible. Every self-help book Maya had forced on her screamed that this was a trap, that Jake was manipulating her again, pulling her back into his orbit with manufactured urgency. But there was something in his voice that didn't sound like manipulation. It sounded like genuine fear. What's this about? She asked carefully. Not over the phone. Can I come to your apartment just for a few minutes? I swear I'll leave right after. Ella glanced at the clock. She had 4 hours before her shift started. 4 hours that she'd planned to spend doing laundry and maybe sleeping, not dealing with whatever crisis Jake had invented to get her attention. Fine, she heard herself say. You have 15 minutes. He arrived in 12, looking worse than she'd ever seen him. His suit was rumpled, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd slept as poorly as she had during the worst days of their marriage. Thank you for seeing me, he said, standing awkwardly in her doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. He wasn't, but Ella's nursing instincts were in overdrive. Whatever was happening, Jake looked like he was about to collapse. She stepped back, letting him enter, and watched as he paced her small living room like a caged animal. Talk, she said flatly. Your 15 minutes started when you called. Jake turned to face her, and Ella saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. Genuine, unvarnished terror. Who is Daniel Vega? The question hit like cold water. Ella kept her face carefully neutral. Why are you asking? Because 3 days ago, my paralegal, Sarah, broke up with me, said she couldn't see me anymore, that it wasn't safe. When I pushed her for details, she said someone had explained to her that I wasn't the man she thought I was, that if she knew what was good for her, she'd stay far away from me. Ella's stomach dropped. What does that have to do with Daniel? The next day, my boss called me into his office, told me there had been some concerns raised about my ethics during our divorce proceedings. Somehow, and he wouldn't tell me how, someone had gotten copies of emails between me and my lawyer discussing strategies to hide assets, discussing how to make sure you couldn't fight the settlement. Jake, let me finish. His hands were shaking. Yesterday, my bank called, said there were irregularities in my accounts, wanted to verify some large transactions I supposedly made. Transactions I never authorized. They've frozen everything pending investigation. Ella sank onto her couch, her mind racing. You think Daniel did this? I don't think. I know. Jake pulled out his phone with trembling hands, showing her a text message. Unknown number, 5 words. Actions have consequences. Remember that. When did you get this? This morning. Ella, I'm not stupid. I saw the way he looked at me at that club. I saw what he is. And I know, his voice cracked. I know what I did to you was wrong. The money, the lies, all of it. But I can't have my entire life destroyed. I have student loans, a mortgage, my career. You should have thought about that before you drained our savings account. The words came out harsher than Ella intended, sharpened by the complicated tangle of emotions twisting through her chest. I know. Jake collapsed into the chair across from her, burying his face in his hands. I know, okay? I was angry and petty, and I wanted to hurt you because you were leaving, and I couldn't control that. It was wrong. It was unforgivable. And I'm sorry, Ella. I am so sorry. Ella stared at the man she'd been married to for 5 years. This stranger who'd once promised to love and cherish her. She'd imagined this moment, Jake apologizing, Jake admitting what he'd done, countless times during the lonely nights after their divorce. In her imagination, it had felt triumphant, vindicating. In reality, it just felt sad. Did Daniel tell you to come here? She asked quietly. No, he hasn't contacted me directly at all. That's what makes it so terrifying. He's just dismantling my life piece by piece, and I can't stop it. I can't fight someone I can't even see. Jake looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. Please, I'm begging you. Tell him to stop. Tell him I'll make this right. I'll give you the money back, all of it. I'll confess to my boss about the unethical billing. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please make him stop. You think I have that kind of influence over him? I think he cares about you. I think if you asked him to stop, he would. Ella's phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Are you all right? I'm outside if you need me. Her breath caught. He was here. Somehow, he'd known Jake was coming, and he'd positioned himself to intervene if necessary. It should have felt invasive, controlling. Instead, it felt like safety. She stood, walking to her window. Sure enough, Daniel's car was parked across the street, and she could see his silhouette in the driver's seat. Ella? Jake's voice was pleading. Please. She turned back to face him, this man who'd taken so much from her, who'd made her small and doubtful and afraid, who'd stolen her money and her dreams and nearly destroyed her belief in her own worth. And now he was begging her for mercy from the man who'd decided to give her justice. I'll talk to Daniel, she said finally. But I'm not promising anything. And Jake, whether he stops or not, you give me that money back, every penny. If you're truly sorry, you'll do the right thing regardless of whether someone's forcing you to. Relief flooded Jake's face. Yes, absolutely. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers today. Thank you, Ella. Thank you so much. He left quickly, practically running out of her apartment. Ella watched him go, then grabbed her jacket and headed downstairs. Daniel was leaning against his car when she emerged, his expression carefully neutral. How much did you hear? She asked. Most of it. Your windows are open. Of course they are. Ella crossed her arms, not sure whether to be angry or grateful. Did you do all those things? His girlfriend, his boss, his bank accounts? Yes. No hesitation, no attempt to justify or explain, just simple honesty. Why? Because he hurt you. Because he stole from you. Because men like him only understand consequences. Daniel's jaw tightened, and because I wanted him to know what it feels like to be powerless. Daniel, before you ask me to stop, you should know something. He pulled out his own phone, showing her a series of photographs. These are copies of the emails his boss received. Communications between Jake and his divorce lawyer discussing strategies to hide assets, to drag out proceedings until you ran out of money for legal fees to ensure you couldn't fight the settlement. What he did wasn't just unethical, Ella. Some of it was actually illegal. Ella stared at the evidence of Jake's betrayal, black and white and undeniable. She'd suspected, but seeing the proof, seeing how deliberately he'd worked to destroy her, made something inside her chest feel like it was cracking. The bank account irregularities aren't fabricated, Daniel continued quietly. I had someone audit his finances. He's been skimming from client escrow accounts for 2 years. Small amounts, easy to hide, but absolutely grounds for disbarment if it came to light. I didn't create this situation, I just exposed it. And his paralegal? I had someone explain to her very clearly exactly what kind of man she was dating. The affairs he had during your marriage, the way he manipulated you, the financial fraud. She made her own choice to leave. Ella looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd appointed himself her protector. You're dismantling his entire life. Yes. I didn't ask you to do that. I know. Daniel's expression was unreadable. Are you angry? Was she? Ella examined her feelings honestly. She should be angry, should be horrified that Daniel had taken matters into his own hands without consulting her, should be demanding he stop immediately. But underneath the shock and confusion, what she mostly felt was a fierce, savage satisfaction. I told him I'd talk to you, she said carefully, that I'd ask you to stop. And are you asking me to stop? Ella thought about Jake's face in the nightclub, smug and satisfied as he'd paraded his new girlfriend. Thought about the emails she'd just seen, the calculated cruelty in his plan to leave her with nothing. Thought about the $40,000 he'd stolen and the dreams she'd had to abandon because of it. No, she said quietly, but I'm asking you to give him a chance to make this right. He said he'd return the money. I want to see if he actually does it. And if he doesn't, then you can do whatever you think is appropriate. She stepped closer, looking up into those dark eyes. But Daniel, I need you to understand something. I appreciate what you're doing. I do. But I can't be with someone who makes decisions about my life without including me in them. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, I need to be a partner, not a princess in a tower you're protecting. Something shifted in Daniel's expression. He reached out, cupping her face gently. You're right. I should have told you what I was doing. Should have asked if you wanted me to intervene. He paused, seeming to struggle for words. When I think about what he did to you, I can't be rational. All I want is to make him suffer the way he made you suffer. I know, and part of me loves you for that. The words were out before Ella could stop them, and she felt heat flood her face. I mean, not love, obviously. It's too soon for that. I just meant Daniel kissed her, deep and thorough and utterly derailing her spiral of embarrassment. When he pulled back, his eyes were warm. For the record, he murmured against her mouth, it's not too soon. Not for me. Ella's heart stuttered. Daniel? I know, you're not ready to hear it, and that's fine. But I wanted you to know, whatever this is between us, it's not casual for me. It stopped being casual the moment you asked me to dance. He kissed her again, softer this time, then stepped back. I'll wait to see if he returns the money. But Ella, if he doesn't, I'm not stopping, and I'm not apologizing for it. I wouldn't expect you to. She smiled faintly. You're not exactly the apologizing type. No, he agreed. I'm really not. They stood there for a moment, facing each other across the space that separated their worlds. Then Ella made a decision. I have a shift in 3 hours. Come upstairs. We need to talk about boundaries. The conversation that followed was difficult. Ella laid out what she needed: transparency, inclusion in decisions that affected her life, respect for her autonomy. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression serious, and when she finished, he nodded. I can do that, but I need something from you too. What? I need you to understand that protecting the people I care about is part of who I am. I can promise to consult you before I act. I can promise to respect your choices, but I can't promise to stand by and do nothing when someone hurts you. I'm not asking you to do nothing. I'm asking you to talk to me first. Even in emergencies? Especially in emergencies. Ella took his hand. Daniel, I've spent 5 years with someone who made decisions for me, for my own good. I can't do that again, even if your intentions are better than his were. Something flickered across Daniel's face. Understanding, maybe, or regret. You're right. I'm sorry. I'll do better. Thank you. He left shortly after, and Ella got ready for her shift with her mind churning. She believed Daniel meant what he said, believed he would try to include her in decisions, but she also knew that changing fundamental patterns of behavior was hard, and Daniel's instinct to control situations, to protect by force if necessary, was deeply ingrained. The question was whether they could build something real while navigating those differences. Her shift that night was mercifully quiet, giving her too much time to think. Around 3 a.m. during a lull, Maya cornered her in the break room. Okay, Spill, you've been weird all night. I'm fine. Ella Martinez, I have known you for 8 years. You are not fine. What happened? So Ella told her about Jake's visit, about Daniel's intervention, about the conversation they'd had afterward. Maya listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, concern, and what looked like reluctant admiration. So your boyfriend is systematically destroying your ex-husband's life, Maya summarized when Ella finished. He's not destroying it. He's just exposing the parts that were already rotten. Ella, that's a very fine line. I know. Ella rubbed her temples. Am I crazy for being okay with this? Honestly, I don't know. Maya sat beside her. On one hand, Jake absolutely deserves consequences for what he did. On the other hand, having your boyfriend handle those consequences is complicated. Everything about Daniel is complicated. Do you trust him? Ella thought about that. Did she? She'd known him less than a month. Everything about this was too fast, too intense, too far outside her normal, careful approach to life. Yes, she said finally. I do. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. Maya studied her for a long moment. Then I guess my next question is, does he trust you? To know your own mind, to make your own choices? He says he does. Actions, Ella, not words. Watch what he does, not what he says. It was good advice. Ella carried it with her through the rest of her shift, through the next 2 days as she waited to see if Jake would actually return the money. Daniel called and texted regularly, but he didn't push to see her, didn't demand her time. Just checked in, asked about her day, made her laugh with stories about Antonio's latest culinary experiments, giving her space, respecting her boundaries. On the third day, a courier arrived at her apartment with a certified check for $40,000 and a legal document releasing Jake from any further financial obligations related to their divorce. Ella stared at the check for a long moment, this piece of paper representing years of stolen dreams. Then she called Daniel. He did it, she said when he answered. He returned the money. I know. I've been monitoring his accounts. At her silence, Daniel sighed. I'm sorry, old habits. I'll stop. Thank you. Ella looked at the check again. What happens now? Do you stop? That depends. What do you want to happen? It was such a Daniel question, putting the choice back in her hands, refusing to decide for her. Ella thought about Jake, terrified and apologetic in her apartment. Thought about the emails showing his calculated cruelty. Thought about the 5 years she'd lost believing his lies about her worth. His boss already knows about the unethical conduct during our divorce, she said slowly. That has consequences regardless of what you do. The bank investigation into the escrow fraud, that's separate, right? You didn't fabricate evidence? I didn't fabricate anything. I just made sure the right people were looking in the right places. Then let that play out naturally. If he's been stealing from clients, they deserve to know. But the girlfriend, his personal life, leave that alone. He's lost enough. You're more merciful than I would be. Maybe, or maybe I just don't want to spend any more energy on Jake Martinez. Ella smiled faintly. I have better things to focus on. Such as? Well, there's this guy I've been seeing, very intense, slightly overprotective, prone to grand gestures. I'm thinking I should probably make sure he knows I'm serious about him. Is that so? She could hear the smile in Daniel's voice. And how are you planning to do that? I thought maybe I'd introduce him to Maya, let her give him the shovel talk, make sure his intentions are honorable. Ella, my intentions toward you are many things, but I'm not sure honorable is the right word. Heat flooded through her. Daniel, have dinner with me Friday. Not Maria's, somewhere else. Somewhere I can take you dancing afterward. I don't really dance. You danced with me. That was different. That was desperation. Then be desperate again. Say yes. Ella laughed, feeling lighter than she had in days. Yes. Friday. But Daniel? Yes. Maya's coming too, and you're going to sit there and answer every invasive question she asks without complaint. Terrifying, I accept. Friday arrived faster than Ella expected. She spent an hour getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a deep green dress that Maya had bullied her into buying. When Daniel arrived to pick her up, the look on his face made every minute of anxiety worthwhile. You're staring, she said, fighting a smile. I'm appreciating. There's a difference. He offered his arm. Your interrogator awaits. Maya had chosen this restaurant, a trendy place in the arts district that was just expensive enough to be impressive, but not so fancy that it felt like a performance. She was already seated when they arrived, wearing her best professional smile and the expression she usually reserved for cross-examining residents who'd made medication errors. Daniel Vega, she said, shaking his hand with a grip that was probably stronger than necessary. I've heard a lot about you. All terrible, I hope. Daniel settled into his chair with easy confidence. Ella speaks very highly of you, Miss Chen. Maya. And she should. I kept her sane through law school, med school, and a disastrous marriage. I plan to keep her sane through whatever this is. I appreciate that, truly. Daniel's expression grew serious. Ella deserves people who look out for her. She does, which is why I have questions. What followed was possibly the most uncomfortable hour of Ella's life. Maya asked everything about Daniel's family business, his intentions toward Ella, his past relationships, his views on commitment. She pressed him on the Jake situation, on his tendency toward control, on what he was looking for in a relationship. To his credit, Daniel answered everything honestly. He didn't dodge or deflect. When Maya asked if he'd always been wealthy, he talked about growing up with privilege, but also with the constant pressure of family expectations. When she asked about his longest relationship, he admitted he'd never been in love before, never let anyone close enough for it to happen. "Why Ella?" Maya asked finally. "And don't give me some line about her being special. Everyone thinks their girlfriend is special. Why her specifically?" Daniel looked at Ella across the table, his dark eyes thoughtful. "Because she asked a stranger to dance when she could have just left. Because she works night shifts to save people she's never met and will never see again. Because when I told her the truth about my family, she didn't run. She asked questions. She didn't try to change me or save me. She just wanted to understand me." He turned back to Maya. "Your friend is brave and kind and stronger than she knows. She's been hurt, badly, by someone who should have protected her. And I know I'm not what she needs. I'm complicated and dangerous, and I solve problems in ways that would horrify most people. But I want to try anyway. I want to be better than I am because of her. And if that's not enough, if you think I'm going to hurt her, then tell me now, and I'll walk away." Maya stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Ella. "Well?" "Well, what?" Ella asked. "Do you believe him?" Did she? Ella looked at Daniel, really looked at him, this powerful, dangerous man who'd brought her coffee after brutal shifts and answered Maya's interrogation without flinching, who'd avenged her without being asked but stopped when she set boundaries, who'd told her he was falling in love with her and then given her space to process it. "Yes," she said quietly. "I do." Maya sighed dramatically. "Fine, but I'm watching you, Vega. One toe out of line, and I will end you in ways that make your family business look like a lemonade stand." Daniel's smile was genuine. I wouldn't expect anything less. The tension broke, and the rest of dinner was actually pleasant. Maya and Daniel discovered a shared love of obscure crime documentaries, which led to a passionate debate about unsolved cases that left Ella laughing and slightly disturbed. By the time dessert arrived, Maya was asking Daniel for recommendations on home security systems. "I like him," Maya announced as they were leaving. "I don't trust him yet, but I like him." "Good enough," Daniel said. "Thank you for caring enough about Ella to terrify me." "Oh, honey, that wasn't terrifying. That was the warm-up. Wait until you meet her brother." After they dropped Maya at her apartment, Daniel drove Ella to the same nightclub where they'd first met. The VIP host recognized him immediately, leading them to a private section overlooking the dance floor. "Why here?" Ella asked as Daniel ordered drinks. "Because this is where it started, where you were brave enough to ask a stranger for help." He took her hand. "I wanted to see if you'd be brave enough to dance with me again. Not because you're running from something, but because you want to." Ella's heart stuttered. "Daniel, one dance, Ella, then I'll take you home, I promise." He led her onto the floor, and this time when his arms came around her, there was no performance, no ex-husband to impress, no crisis to escape. Just the two of them, moving together to music that was too loud in a future that was completely uncertain. "I'm falling for you," Ella admitted against his shoulder. "And it terrifies me." "I know. I'm already gone." His hand tightened at her waist. "And it should terrify you. I'm not easy to love. Neither am I." "That's where you're wrong." Daniel pulled back enough to look at her. "You're the easiest person in the world to love. The hard part is feeling like I deserve it." Ella kissed him there on the dance floor, surrounded by strangers and possibility. When they pulled apart, his eyes were dark with promise. "Take me home," she whispered. He did, and for the first time since her divorce, Ella felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The knock came at 2 a.m, sharp and insistent enough to cut through Ella's exhausted sleep. She'd been home from her shift for less than 3 hours, barely enough time to shower and collapse into bed. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, probably a neighbor with the wrong apartment or someone drunk looking for a party. Then it came again, harder this time, and with it a voice she recognized. "Ella, open the door, please." Jake. Every instinct screamed at her to call the police, to call Daniel, to do anything except open that door. But there was something in his voice that wasn't anger or manipulation. It was pure, undiluted terror. Ella grabbed her robe and looked through the peephole. Jake stood in the hallway, disheveled and wild-eyed, clutching something against his chest. Even through the distorted lens, she could see he was shaking. Against her better judgment, she opened the door but kept the chain engaged. "What are you doing here, Jake?" "I need to give you something." He held up a manila envelope with trembling hands. "Please, just take it and I'll go. I swear I'll never bother you again." "It's 2 a.m. I know, and I'm sorry, but I couldn't wait. Please, Ella, please." There was something so desperate, so broken in his voice that Ella found herself unlatching the chain. The moment the door opened fully, Jake thrust the envelope at her like it was burning his hands. "What is this?" she asked, taking it cautiously. "The rest of what I owe you. Everything." Jake's words tumbled out in a rush. "The $40,000 was just what I took from our account. But there was more, so much more. The money you put me through school with, the promotions I got because you were handling everything at home so I could work late, the opportunities I had because you sacrificed yours. I calculated it all. 5 years of your salary that went to supporting my career instead of building your own. It's all there, every penny, plus interest." Ella opened the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was a certified check that made her breath catch, $187,000. "Jake, it's what you're owed, what you earned." He laughed, but it came out broken and slightly hysterical. "My lawyer said I was insane, said there was no legal obligation, that the divorce settlement was final. But legal obligation isn't the same as moral obligation, and His voice cracked. "I destroyed you, Ella. I took everything you gave me, and I destroyed you with it. This doesn't make it right. Nothing can make it right. But at least it's something." Ella stared at the check, her mind struggling to process what was happening. "Why now? Why like this?" "Because your boyfriend made it very clear that he could destroy me completely if he wanted to. The bank investigation, the ethics review, all of it. He could make it so much worse. But he didn't. He stopped when you asked him to, and I realized—" Jake swallowed hard. "I realized that you showed me more mercy than I ever showed you, and I couldn't live with that. I couldn't live with knowing that the person I hurt the most was the only one fighting for me to have a second chance. Jake, I'm leaving the firm before they fire me, and I'm entering therapy because clearly I have issues I need to deal with before I destroy anyone else." He took a step back toward the hallway. "That's everything I came to say. The money's yours. No strings, no conditions, just what you're owed." He turned to leave, and Ella heard herself call out, "Wait!" But Jake stopped, his shoulders tense. "I don't forgive you," Ella said quietly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did, the way you made me feel about myself, that's going to take a long time to heal from. I know. But I hope you get the help you need. I hope you figure out how to be better." She held up the envelope. "And thank you. For this. For finally doing the right thing." Jake nodded without turning around, then walked away. Ella stood in her doorway until she heard the building's exterior door close, then went back inside and locked her door with shaking hands. The check sat on her kitchen table, impossible to ignore. $187,000. Enough to pay off her student loans, enough to go back to school for her critical care certification. Enough to build the future she'd thought was lost forever. She called Daniel without checking the time. "Ella?" His voice was instantly alert. No trace of sleep. "What's wrong?" "Jake was just here. He brought money, a lot of money. He said it's what he owes me for the years I supported his career." She laughed shakily. "Daniel, it's almost $200,000. There was a brief pause. "Are you all right? Did he threaten you?" "No, he was scared, yes, but not threatening. He said he's leaving his firm, going to therapy. He thanked me for asking you to stop." "I see." Daniel's tone was carefully neutral. "How do you feel about this?" "I don't know. Shocked? Relieved? Confused?" Ella sank onto her couch. "Did you know he was going to do this?" "No, I knew about him leaving the firm. Word travels in legal circles. But the money, the apology, that was his choice. He said you could have destroyed him completely, that you stopped because I asked you to. I did stop. You set a boundary, and I respected it." She could hear rustling, like he was getting out of bed. "Do you want me to come over?" Ella looked at the check again, at this tangible proof that her suffering hadn't been invisible, that someone, even if it was Jake, even if it came too late, had finally acknowledged what he'd taken from her. "Yes," she said softly. "Please." Daniel arrived 20 minutes later, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt that made him look younger and somehow more dangerous. He took one look at Ella's face and pulled her into his arms without a word. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted against his chest. "I wanted him to acknowledge what he did. I wanted him to face consequences. And now he has, and I just feel empty." "That's normal. Closure isn't always satisfying." Daniel's hand moved in slow circles on her back. "The anger doesn't just disappear because someone apologizes. The hurt doesn't vanish because they pay you back. How do you know?" "Because I've been on both sides of it." He guided her to the couch, settling beside her. "My father destroyed a lot of people building his empire. Some of them he tried to make amends with before he died. Gave them money, apologized, tried to make things right. And most of them were just like you, confused that the validation they'd wanted for so long didn't actually heal anything." Ella leaned into him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "What happened to them? The people your father hurt?" "Some of them took the money and disappeared. Started over somewhere new. Some of them refused it entirely, said they didn't want anything from a Vega ever again, and some—" his voice softened. "Some of them used it to build something better than what they'd lost, turned their pain into purpose." "Is that what you think I should do?" "I think you should do whatever feels right to you. Keep the money, donate it, burn it in your fireplace. It's yours to decide." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But if you're asking my opinion, I think you've spent 5 years putting your dreams on hold. Maybe it's time to pursue them." The Advanced Critical Care Certification. The specialized training she'd wanted since she was 16 years old, sitting in that ICU waiting room, watching Christine save her brother's life. It had always felt impossible, a fantasy she'd learned to stop wanting. Now it was sitting on her kitchen table in the form of a check. "I'm scared," Ella admitted. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I spent all these years thinking I could do it, but I actually can't?" "Then you'll find out, and you'll deal with it. But Ella—" Daniel turned her to face him, his dark eyes intense. "I've watched you come home from shifts where you've held people together with nothing but skill and determination. I've heard you talk about cases you've saved and cases you've lost. And the difference in your voice tells me everything I need to know about how good you are at what you do. You're not going to fail. And if you do, it won't be because you weren't good enough. It'll be because the program wasn't right for you. You have a lot of faith in someone you've known for less than 2 months." "I have faith in what I've seen, and what I've seen is extraordinary." He smiled faintly. "Besides, you trusted me when you had every reason not to. The least I can do is return the favor." Ella kissed him, soft and grateful, and full of all the things she wasn't ready to say out loud yet. When they pulled apart, Daniel's eyes were warm. "Stay," she said. "Tonight. I don't want to be alone." "I'm not going anywhere." They fell asleep on her couch, tangled together, and when Ella woke to sunlight streaming through her windows, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next 2 months were a whirlwind. Ella applied to 3 advanced critical care programs, submitted her transcripts, wrote essays about why she wanted to specialize in the field. The application process was grueling, forcing her to articulate dreams she'd buried so deep she'd almost forgotten they existed. Daniel was there through all of it, reading her essays and asking questions that made her think harder about her answers. He never told her what to write, never tried to influence her choices. He just listened, encouraged, and celebrated every small victory. "You got an interview," he said one evening, reading the email over her shoulder. "Boston Memorial. That's one of the best programs in the country. It's also 3,000 miles away." Ella felt her stomach clench with anxiety. "If I get in, when you get in. If I get in, I'd have to move, leave my job, my apartment, everything I know." She turned to look at him. "Leave you?" Daniel's expression was carefully neutral. "Is that what you want? For me to tell you not to go?" "I don't know what I want. We've barely started whatever this is, and I'm already thinking about leaving. That feels wrong." "Ella." He took her hands. "I knew from the beginning that you had dreams bigger than this city. That's part of what drew me to you. I'm not going to ask you to give that up for me. I would never ask you to do that. But what about us? If you go to Boston, I'll visit every weekend if you want me to. We'll make it work." That's not realistic. You have a business to run, which operates in multiple cities, including Boston. Daniel's smile was gentle. Ella, I've spent my entire life in one place, running my father's empire, meeting expectations that were set before I was born. If you go to Boston and pursue your dreams, that doesn't mean I lose you. It means I get to watch you become everything you're meant to be. And maybe, he paused, maybe it gives me permission to figure out who I'm meant to be too. What does that mean? It means I've been thinking about expansion, about opening new operations, diversifying into legitimate ventures that don't require me to operate in gray areas. I've been thinking about it for years, but I never had a reason to actually do it. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You're my reason, Ella. If you're brave enough to chase your dreams, then I should be brave enough to chase mine. Ella felt tears prick her eyes. I love you. I know it's too soon and too fast, and I should probably wait, but I love you, and I need you to know that before I make any decisions about my future. I love you too. Daniel kissed her softly. Which is why I'm telling you to take the interview. Take all the interviews. And when you get accepted, because you will, I want you to choose the program that's best for you, not the one that's closest to me. That's terrifying. I know. But you're the woman who asked a stranger to dance because you refused to let your ex-husband see you broken. You're brave enough for this. The Boston interview was scheduled for late March. Ella flew out on a Thursday. Her nerves wound so tight she could barely sit still on the plane. The program director was a stern woman in her 50s who asked questions that felt designed to expose every weakness in Ella's application. You've been out of advanced training for nearly 6 years, she said, reviewing Ella's file. Why should we believe you can handle the rigor of this program? Because I've been handling rigor for 6 years, Ella replied, keeping her voice steady. I work in one of the busiest emergency departments in the country. I've coded patients, managed traumas, made life or death decisions with seconds to spare. The only difference between what I do now and what I do in your program is the depth of specialization. The pressure, the stakes, the demands on my time and energy, I'm already living that. And your divorce? The question was invasive, probably inappropriate, but Ella had learned enough from Daniel to recognize a test when she saw one. Taught me that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can survive having everything taken from me and still choose to build something new. If you're asking whether personal difficulties will interfere with my performance, the answer is no. If anything, they've made me more committed to pursuing this. The director's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes that might have been approval. We'll be in touch, Miss Martinez. Ella flew home exhausted, but oddly exhilarated. She'd done well, she thought. Not perfect, but good enough to be considered. The question was whether good enough would be enough. Daniel picked her up from the airport, took one look at her face, and drove straight to Maria's restaurant. Antonio fussed over her like she'd been gone for months instead of days, bringing out special dishes he'd been experimenting with. He's nervous, Maria confided, sitting beside Ella, while Daniel talked to Antonio in the kitchen. Your young man, he's been like a caged tiger since you left, checking his phone every 5 minutes, snapping at people who don't deserve it. He knew where I was. Knowing and being comfortable with it are different things, dear. Maria patted her hand. He's not used to caring about someone more than his work. It makes him vulnerable, and men like Daniel don't handle vulnerability well. Men like Daniel? Men who've had to be strong their whole lives, who've learned that caring about people makes them targets. Maria's expression grew sad. His mother's death nearly destroyed him. Did he tell you that? He mentioned she died when he was 19. It was brutal, fast and painful, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. I watched that boy try to hold everything together. His father's grief, his own, the business that was falling apart because his father couldn't function. He was barely more than a child himself, and he had to become a man overnight. She looked toward the kitchen. He hasn't let anyone close since then. Until you. Ella felt something tight and painful lodge in her chest. I'm not trying to hurt him. I know, dear, but love always hurts a little, doesn't it? The question is whether the joy makes the pain worthwhile. Daniel emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 plates of pasta, Antonio beaming behind him. Whatever tension had been riding his shoulders seemed to have eased, and when he looked at Ella, his smile was genuine. How did it go? He asked, settling across from her. Hard, intimidating, possibly disastrous. Ella poked at her pasta. The director asked about my divorce. Daniel's expression darkened. That's inappropriate. Probably, but I think she was testing me, seeing if I'd fold under pressure or defend myself. And I defended myself, told her my personal difficulties made me stronger, not weaker. Good. He reached across the table, lacing his fingers through hers. You are stronger. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time. They ate in comfortable silence, and Ella felt some of her anxiety ease. Whatever happened with Boston, whatever decision she had to make about her future, she wasn't facing them alone anymore. 3 weeks later, the acceptance letter arrived. Ella stared at it for a full minute, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. She'd been accepted. Not just accepted, offered a partial scholarship, recognition of her years of experience, placement in their most competitive track. She called Daniel before she called anyone else. I got in, she said when he answered. Boston Memorial. They want me. Of course they do. His voice was warm with pride and something else, something that sounded like grief. Congratulations, Ella. You earned this. The program starts in August. That's 5 months. I know. Daniel, come over. We should celebrate properly. He had champagne waiting when she arrived, good champagne that probably cost more than her monthly rent. They toasted to her success, to her future, and then Daniel pulled her into his arms and held her like he was afraid she might disappear. I'm scared, Ella admitted against his chest, of leaving, of failing, of losing this. You won't fail, and you won't lose this. He pulled back enough to look at her. Ella, I meant what I said. We'll make it work. I'll visit, you'll visit, we'll figure it out. Long-distance relationships rarely work. We're not a statistic, we're us. He kissed her softly. And I'm not letting you go without a fight. The next 5 months passed in a blur of preparation and bittersweet goodness. Ella worked her final shifts at the hospital, said goodbye to colleagues who'd become family, packed up her apartment. Daniel helped with everything, quietly efficient, never once suggesting she reconsider. But Ella could see the cost in his eyes, in the way he held her a little tighter each night, in the silences that grew longer as August approached. 2 weeks before she was scheduled to leave, Jake called. I heard about Boston, he said without preamble. Congratulations. That program is nearly impossible to get into. Thank you. Ella was still surprised when Jake called these days, still adjusting to the strange new dynamic between them. Not friends, not enemies, just two people who'd once meant everything to each other and now meant very little. I also heard you're seeing someone. The guy from the club. Daniel, yes. He's good to you? Very. There was a pause. Good. You deserve that. Another pause, longer this time. Ella, I need to tell you something about the night I brought you the money. Okay. I lied. Or rather, I didn't tell you the whole truth. Jake's voice was strained. Daniel didn't just stop his investigation because you asked. He came to see me. Ella's stomach dropped. What? The night before I showed up at your apartment, he came to my house, just walked past my doorman like he owned the building. Said we needed to have a conversation. What kind of conversation? The kind where he explained very clearly exactly how thoroughly he could destroy me if he chose to. The bank fraud, the ethics violations, all of it. He had documentation I didn't even know existed, evidence that could have sent me to prison. Jake laughed shakily. But then he said something I didn't expect. He said that you'd asked him to give me a chance to make things right, and that your mercy meant more to him than his satisfaction. That if I returned everything I owed you, not just the $40,000, but everything, and got my life together, he'd make sure the investigations concluded without criminal charges. Ella sank onto her couch, her mind reeling. He blackmailed you. He motivated me. There's a difference. Jake's tone was wry. Ella, I'm not calling to get him in trouble. I'm calling because I wanted you to know the truth before you move across the country with him. He's not safe. He's powerful and dangerous, and he operates outside the law when it suits him. And you should know that before you trust him completely. I already know all of that, Ella said quietly. He's never hidden what he is from me. But did he tell you about coming to see me? About threatening me? No. Then maybe he's hiding more than you think. Jake sighed. Look, I know I have no right to give you advice about relationships. I destroyed ours through my own selfishness and stupidity, but I care enough about you to want you to be careful, that's all. After he hung up, Ella sat staring at her phone for a long time. Then she called Daniel. Did you threaten Jake? she asked when he answered. After I asked you to stop, did you go to his house and force him to pay me back? There was a long pause. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd be angry. And because by the time you found out, you'd already have the money and he'd already be getting help. I thought the outcome was more important than the method. Daniel, we talked about this, about you making decisions that affect my life without consulting me. I know, and I'm sorry. But Ella, his voice was strained. He hurt you, badly, and the money he gave you initially wasn't enough. It wasn't even close to enough. So yes, I went to him. I explained very clearly what would happen if he didn't make things right, and I don't regret it. Even though I asked you to respect my boundaries? Even then. He was quiet for a moment. You can be angry. You should be angry, but I won't apologize for making sure you got what you deserved. Ella closed her eyes, torn between fury and reluctant understanding. I need some space to think about this. All right. His voice was carefully neutral. How much space? I don't know. I'll call you when I'm ready. She didn't call for 3 days. Spent those days working shifts and packing boxes and trying to figure out how she felt about what Daniel had done. On one hand, he'd violated her trust, made decisions without her input after promising not to. On the other hand, he'd gotten her justice that she never would have gotten on her own. The problem was that both things could be true at once. Maya found her on the second day, sitting in her nearly empty apartment surrounded by boxes. You look terrible, Maya announced, setting down bags of takeout. Talk. So Ella told her everything. About Jake's call, about Daniel's threat, about the impossible tangle of gratitude and betrayal she felt. Do you think he'll do it again? Maya asked when she finished. Make decisions for you without asking? I don't know. He says he was protecting me, that he doesn't regret it. That's not what I asked. I asked if you think he'll do it again. Ella thought about that. Thought about the last 5 months. About every time Daniel had stepped back and let her make her own choices. About the way he'd encouraged her to apply to Boston, even though it meant losing her. About the respect he'd shown for her boundaries in every other aspect of their relationship. No, she said finally. I think this was about Jake specifically. About Daniel's need to make sure the person who hurt me faced consequences. But I don't think he'd do it in other situations. Are you sure? Because, Ella, men who need to control situations don't usually stop just because you ask them to. Daniel's not Jake. I know. But he's also not safe. He's powerful and dangerous and used to getting what he wants through force when necessary. That doesn't just go away because he's in love with you. I know that too. Ella met her friend's eyes. But Maya, when I'm with him, I feel seen, valued, protected in a way that doesn't make me feel small. He pushes me to be better, to chase my dreams, to believe I'm capable of things I thought were impossible. Yes, he made a decision without me. Yes, he crossed a boundary, but he also got me justice, and that... Her voice cracked. That matters. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then you need to decide if the good outweighs the bad. And if it does, you need to tell him exactly what your boundaries are moving forward. No more ambiguity. No more assuming he knows what you need. You spell it out clearly, and if he crosses those lines again, you walk away. No second chances. It was good advice, and Ella called Daniel that night. I'm still angry, she said when he answered, about you going behind my back, about you deciding what I needed without asking me. I understand. But I also understand why you did it, and I know that Jake hurt me in ways that probably triggered something in you. Some need to fix it, to make it right. She took a breath. So here's what I need from you going forward. Complete honesty. Even when you think I'll be angry, even when you think the truth will hurt, I need to know what you're doing, what you're planning, what decisions you're making that affect my life. Can you do that? Yes. Even if it's hard, even if you think you're protecting me by hiding it? Especially then. His voice was rough. Ella, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix it, but I am. I never want to make you feel like I'm controlling you the way he did. You're not. But you could be if you're not careful, so we both need to be vigilant. She paused. I love you. I'm still moving to Boston, and I still want this to work between us. But I need you to promise me no more secrets, no more decisions made without me. I promise. And Ella, thank you. For what? For not giving up on me, for seeing the difference between protection and control, for being willing to work through this instead of just walking away. That's what love is, isn't it? Ella smiled despite her tears. Choosing to stay even when it's hard. Choosing to believe the best in someone even when they've shown you their worst. That's love, Daniel said softly. Then I'm terrified of losing it. Then don't give me a reason to leave. 2 weeks later, Daniel drove Ella to the airport for her flight to Boston. Her entire life was packed into boxes being shipped across the country. Her apartment was empty. Her job was finished. Everything she'd known for the past 6 years was behind her, and everything she'd dreamed of was waiting ahead. I'll visit in 2 weeks, Daniel said as they stood at the security checkpoint. There's an acquisition I need to finalize in Boston. Completely coincidental timing. Ella laughed through her tears. Completely coincidental, I'm sure. I love you. He cupped her face, his dark eyes intense. I'm proud of you, and I can't wait to see you become everything you're meant to be. I love you too. She kissed him, long and deep, not caring who was watching. Thank you for believing in me, for pushing me to chase this even when it meant losing time together. I'm not losing you. We're just figuring out how to love each other across distance. He smiled faintly. Besides, absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? Or it makes the heart forget. Not a chance. You're unforgettable, Ella Martinez. She walked through security without looking back, knowing that if she did, she'd lose her courage entirely. But as her plane lifted off, carrying her toward her new life, Ella felt something unexpected settle in her chest. Peace. She was finally chasing her dreams, finally becoming the person she'd always meant to be. And somehow, impossibly, she'd found someone who loved her enough to let her go. Boston in August was humid and overwhelming, nothing like the city Ella had left behind. Her apartment was a cramped studio in a building that had definitely seen better days, but the commute to Boston Memorial was only 20 minutes and the rent was manageable on her stipend. She spent the first week unpacking boxes and trying not to count the hours until Daniel's promised visit. The program was brutal from day one. 12-hour shifts in the critical care unit, lectures that ran until midnight, case studies that required her to defend every decision under the scrutiny of attending physicians who seemed determined to expose any weakness. Ella came home exhausted every night, collapsing into bed with barely enough energy to text Daniel goodnight. But she loved it. Every grueling, impossible moment of it. You're smiling, her attending physician noted on Friday of her second week, catching Ella reviewing a patient chart. That's unusual for someone who just worked a 14-hour shift. Am I? Ella touched her face, surprised to find it was true. I guess I'm just happy to be here. That'll wear off in about 6 months, the woman said dryly, but her eyes were kind. You did good work today, Martinez. The trauma case, you made the right call on the blood pressure management. Not everyone would have caught that early. The praise carried Ella through the rest of her shift and onto the train home. She was still riding that high when she opened her apartment door and found Daniel sitting on her couch. You're early, she said, her exhaustion evaporating instantly. You said next week? I lied. He stood, and the sight of him in her small apartment, so out of place among her secondhand furniture and bare walls, made her throat tight. I couldn't wait another week. Ella dropped her bag and crossed the room in 3 strides, launching herself into his arms. He caught her easily, holding her like she was something precious, and when he kissed her, it tasted like coming home. I missed you, she whispered against his mouth. So much. I know, me too. He pulled back enough to study her face. You look tired. Exhausted. The program is insane, she laughed, and I love every second of it. Good. That's... His voice caught. That's really good, Ella. She led him to the couch, curling into his side while he told her about his week, meetings in New York, a new property acquisition in Chicago, the mundane details of running an empire. It should have been boring, but Ella found herself hanging on every word, starving for this connection after 2 weeks of separation. How long can you stay? She asked. 3 days. I have meetings in New York on Tuesday. 3 days, Ella repeated. It wasn't enough. Would never be enough. But it was what they had. They spent the weekend wrapped in each other, making up for lost time. Daniel took her to dinner at restaurants she could never afford on her stipend, walked with her through the public garden, listened patiently while she talked through complex cases she was studying. On Sunday night, lying in her too small bed with the window open to catch whatever breeze existed, Ella felt something shift in her chest. I don't know how to do this, she admitted quietly. Miss you this much and still function. You're doing it already. You've been functioning fine for 2 weeks. Have I? Because it feels like I'm just going through the motions until I can see you again. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her shoulder. Do you regret coming here? No, never. This program is everything I hoped it would be. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. But I didn't expect it to hurt this much. Being away from you. I know. His hand cupped her cheek. I feel it too. Every day. Every hour. How do we survive this? 2 more years of training, Daniel. 2 years of stolen weekends and phone calls and missing each other. We survive it because the alternative is worse. Because you becoming the doctor you're meant to be is worth the pain. Because... He pulled her down for a kiss. Because I love you enough to wait. Ella felt tears prick her eyes. Promise me something. Anything. Well, promise me that if this gets too hard, if the distance becomes too much, you'll tell me. You won't just suffer in silence until it destroys what we have. I promise. Same goes for you. Deal. He left Monday morning, and Ella threw herself into her work with renewed determination. If she was going to make this sacrifice, if Daniel was going to make this sacrifice, then she was going to make it count. Every case she studied, every skill she mastered, every patient she helped save was proof that the distance wasn't for nothing. The weeks blurred together. Daniel visited when he could, usually every 2 or 3 weeks, staying for long weekends that felt simultaneously too short and intensely precious. Ella flew home for Thanksgiving, spending 4 glorious days wrapped up in him before returning to Boston for finals. Christmas came, and with it her first real break since the program started. Ella flew home on December 23rd, exhausted and exhilarated and desperately homesick for a city she'd left 6 months ago. Maya picked her up from the airport, taking one look at her and pulling her into a fierce hug. You look terrible and happy. I don't know whether to be worried or proud. Both, definitely both. Ella laughed. How are things here? Same as always. The ER is chaos. Your replacement is terrible, and I've been dating someone for 3 months who might actually be normal. Maya grinned. Also, your boyfriend has been driving me insane asking if you're eating enough, sleeping enough, if the program is too hard. I told him to ask you directly, but apparently he doesn't want to add to your stress. Ella felt warmth bloom in her chest. He's been checking on me through you? Weekly, sometimes daily during exam periods. Maya shook her head. I hate that I like him. He makes it very difficult to maintain my protective best friend routine. Daniel was waiting at Ella's old apartment, the one she'd never quite given up, subletting it instead on the theory that she might need it during breaks. He'd clearly been there for a while, based on the groceries stocked in her fridge and the fresh flowers on her table. Welcome home, he said, and Ella burst into tears. She cried for 10 minutes straight while Daniel held her, all the stress and exhaustion and homesickness of the past 6 months pouring out in one overwhelming wave. When she finally got herself under control, she found him looking at her with such tenderness it nearly started her crying again. I'm sorry, she hiccuped. I don't know where that came from. You've been holding it together for 6 months. You're allowed to fall apart sometimes. He wiped her tears with his thumbs. How bad is it? Really? It's hard. The program is harder than anything I've ever done. The hours are insane, the pressure is constant, and I'm always terrified I'm going to make a mistake that costs someone their life. She took a shaky breath. But I'm good at it, Daniel. Better than I thought I'd be. My attendings say I have instincts that can't be taught, that I see patterns other residents miss. Of course you do. You've been doing this for years. But now I'm doing it at a level I never imagined possible. Last week I managed a trauma case that 3 years ago would have overwhelmed me completely, and I handled it, not perfectly, but competently. The patient survived because I made the right calls. She laughed, slightly hysterical. I'm becoming the doctor I always wanted to be, and it's terrifying and exhilarating, and I couldn't do it without knowing you're here waiting for me. I'll always be here waiting. Daniel's voice was fierce. However long it takes, whatever you need, I'm here. They spent Christmas with his family, which was both more and less intimidating than Ella expected. Daniel's father was a stern man in his 70s, clearly still sharp despite his retirement. He studied Ella with the same intensity Daniel sometimes showed, asking pointed questions about her training and her goals. My son tells me you're specializing in critical care, he said over dinner. That's a difficult path, high stress, high stakes. Not many people have the constitution for it. No, sir, Ella agreed. But I think I'm one of them. Why? What makes you think you can handle the pressure when so many others burn out? Ella met his eyes steadily. Because I've already survived the worst thing I thought could happen to me. My marriage fell apart. My ex-husband stole everything I'd worked for, and I had to rebuild my entire life from nothing. If I can survive that and come out stronger, I can survive a difficult residency. Something shifted in the older man's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You're tougher than you look. I have to be. Your son doesn't fall for weak women. Daniel choked on his wine while his father laughed, a real laugh that transformed his austere face. No, he certainly doesn't. Welcome to the family, Ella. It wasn't a proposal, wasn't even close to one, but the acceptance in those words settled something in Ella's chest that she hadn't realized was unsettled. New Year's Eve found them back at the nightclub where they'd first met, though this time in the VIP section Daniel had been sitting in that first night. The club was packed with people celebrating, but their corner felt private, removed from the chaos. 1 year ago tonight, I was home alone watching bad television, Ella said, sipping champagne, trying to convince myself I was fine being single, that I didn't need anyone. And now I know that I don't need anyone. I'm perfectly capable of being alone. She turned to face him. But I want you. I choose you. That's different. It is. Daniel set down his glass, his expression serious. Ella, I need to tell you something. Her stomach clenched. That sounds ominous. It's not. At least I hope it's not. He took her hand. I'm opening a Boston office. The acquisition I mentioned back in August. It's been finalized. We're expanding into New England, which means I'll need to be in Boston regularly. Very regularly. Ella stared at him. How regularly? 2 weeks out of every month, at least initially. Maybe more as we establish operations. Daniel, that's a major business decision. Are you doing this because of me? I'm doing this because it's a smart business move that I've been considering for years. The fact that it also means I get to see my girlfriend more often is just a very convenient side effect. He smiled faintly. I promised you honesty, remember? So here's the truth. Yes, you influence the timing, but the decision itself is sound regardless of our relationship. I've wanted to expand into legitimate development and investment for a long time. Boston's market is perfect for it. Legitimate development, Ella repeated, as in not gray areas? As in completely above board, licensed, regulated business operations. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I told you that you made me want to be better. This is me trying to be better. Ella felt tears threaten again. I don't know what to say. Say you'll have dinner with me next week, and the week after that, and every week for the foreseeable future. Yes, obviously yes, she laughed through her tears. When did you become such a romantic? The moment you asked me to dance. The countdown to midnight started around them, voices rising in collective anticipation. Daniel stood, offering his hand, and Ella let him pull her to her feet. Dance with me, he said, like we did a year ago. But this time, not because you're running from something, because you're running toward something. Toward what? Toward us. Toward the future. Toward everything we're building together. They danced as the countdown reached 0, as the club erupted in celebration around them, as confetti rained down from the ceiling. And when Daniel kissed her at midnight, Ella felt something click into place, a sense of rightness that had nothing to do with timing or circumstances and everything to do with choice. She'd chosen him a year ago out of desperation. She was choosing him now out of love. The next 18 months were a blur of growth and challenge. Ella's training intensified, the cases becoming more complex, the stakes higher. She lost patience, saved patience, learned to carry the weight of both with equal grace. Daniel split his time between cities, building his Boston operations while maintaining his existing business. They fought sometimes about schedules and priorities, learned to communicate across distance, figured out how to maintain intimacy when they could only physically be together 2 weeks out of every month. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Maya visited in March, ostensibly to tour Boston, but actually to check on Ella and make sure Daniel was keeping his promises. She grilled him over dinner while Ella watched in amused horror, asking pointed questions about his business practices and his commitment to transparency. I like what you've done with the legitimate development angle, Maya said finally. It's good for you, makes you seem almost respectable. Almost, Daniel agreed, smiling. I'll take it. You better. Because if you hurt her, respectable won't save you from me. I wouldn't dream of it. In June, Ella completed her first year of the program with marks that put her in the top 5% of her class. Her attending physician pulled her aside on her last day. I've been doing this for 20 years, Martinez. I've trained hundreds of residents. You're one of the best I've seen. She smiled. Keep going like this, and you'll have your pick of positions when you graduate. The praise carried Ella through her brief summer break and into her second year, which was somehow even more demanding than the first. But she was ready for it now, confident in her abilities, secure in her choices. In September, Daniel's Boston office officially opened, a sleek space in the financial district that housed his expanding investment and development operations. Ella attended the opening party feeling slightly out of place among the business executives and city officials, until Daniel found her and introduced her to everyone as his partner with such obvious pride that she stopped feeling like an outsider. "You're really doing this," she said later, standing in his new office overlooking the harbor. "Building something completely legitimate. I'm trying. It's harder than I expected, working within all the regulations and restrictions. But it's also—" He paused. "It's cleaner. I sleep better knowing I'm not operating in gray areas anymore. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us." He pulled her close. "Look at what we've built, Ella. You're becoming an incredible doctor. I'm building a business I can be proud of. We're making this long-distance thing work against all odds. That's something worth celebrating." Fall turned to winter, and suddenly Ella was facing her final year of training. The finish line that had seemed impossibly far away was suddenly visible on the horizon. She started receiving recruitment offers from hospitals across the country, prestigious positions with impressive salaries and comprehensive benefits. Boston Memorial made their offer in January, head of their new critical care rapid response team, a position that would put her in charge of the hospital's most complex cases. The salary was generous, the opportunity incredible, and it would mean staying in Boston permanently, staying where Daniel was building his new life. "You don't have to take it because of me," he said when she showed him the offer. "If there's a better position somewhere else, there isn't. This is exactly what I've been training for, a leadership position in critical care at one of the best hospitals in the country." Ella looked at the offer letter again, still hardly believing it was real. "They want me, Daniel, not as a backup choice or a compromise candidate. They specifically created this position for me. Because you're extraordinary at what you do." I didn't used to believe that. When I was married to Jake, I thought wanting more was selfish, that I should be grateful for what I had and stop reaching for impossible things. She met his eyes. "You taught me that reaching for impossible things is how you achieve them. You taught yourself that. I just watched." In March, Ella signed the contract. She'd start her new position in August, immediately after completing her training. She'd have her own team, her own budget, the authority to implement protocols she'd been developing throughout her residency. She was going to change how Boston Memorial handled critical care cases. She was going to save lives that might otherwise be lost. She was going to become everything she'd dreamed of being when she was 16 years old, sitting in that ICU waiting room, watching a nurse hold her family together. April brought unexpected news. Jake was getting remarried, to a woman his own age, a fellow attorney he'd met in therapy. The announcement came via a brief email that was more courtesy than anything else. "I'm happy," Ella told Daniel when she showed him the message. "Actually happy for him. I hope she's good to him. I hope he's good to her." "You're a better person than I am," Daniel said. "I still want to punch him every time I think about what he did to you. He gave me back the money, got his life together. He's trying to be better." She kissed Daniel softly. "Just like you're trying to be better. Just like I'm trying to be better. That's all any of us can do, right? Keep trying. When did you become so wise?" "Somewhere between losing everything and finding you." In June, Ella walked across the stage and received her certification as a critical care specialist. Daniel was in the audience along with Maya, her parents, her brother, and his family. Watching her achieve the dream she'd been chasing for 2 years, the dream she'd almost given up on. After the ceremony, Daniel pulled her aside while everyone was taking pictures. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a small velvet box. Ella's heart stuttered. "Daniel, it's not what you think. Open it." Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant, a caduceus, the symbol of medicine, rendered in intricate detail. "I had it made from Christine's nursing pin," Daniel said quietly. "The nurse who took care of your brother." I tracked down her family, explained who you were and what you'd accomplished. They wanted you to have it. Ella stared at the necklace through tears. How did you even find them? I have resources, and I wanted you to have something that connected you to where this dream started, to the moment you decided to help people the way she helped your family. He fastened it around her neck, and Ella touched the pendant with trembling fingers. Thank you. I don't have words. You don't need words. Just keep being exactly who you are. That night, lying in bed in the apartment they'd started calling theirs instead of hers, Ella traced the outline of the pendant and thought about journeys, about how a single moment could change everything, about how asking a stranger to dance could lead to finding yourself. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Daniel murmured, already half asleep. Always. Summer passed in a blur of preparation. Ella started her new position, assembling her team, implementing protocols, proving that Boston Memorial's faith in her was justified. Daniel's business continued to expand, his legitimate operations growing faster than even he'd anticipated. They bought a condo together in August, a beautiful space in the North End with exposed brick and huge windows and room for both of them to build their lives. Ella hung her certification on the wall next to Daniel's business licenses, tangible proof of how far they'd both come. On a Friday evening in late September, Daniel came home early with Chinese takeout and an unusually nervous expression. I need to ask you something, he said, setting the food on their kitchen counter. Okay. Ella grabbed plates, wondering what could make him this anxious. What's up? Do you remember the night we met, when you asked me to dance? Of course. That was the night that changed my entire life. Mine too. He took the plates from her hand, setting them aside. I've been thinking about that night a lot lately, about how one impulsive decision led to everything we've built, about how you trusted me when you had no reason to, about how I fell in love with you before I even knew your last name. Daniel, let me finish. He took her hands. You asked a stranger to dance because you refused to let your ex-husband see you broken. That courage, that strength, that refusal to stay down, that's what made me fall in love with you. And every day since then, you've shown me more courage, more strength, more determination to become who you're meant to be. He released her hands and reached into his pocket. I know we've talked about timing, about waiting until you were settled in your career, until I'd fully transitioned my business, until everything was perfect. But I realized something. It's never going to be perfect. Life is messy and complicated and full of unexpected challenges. The only thing that matters is facing them together. He dropped to one knee and Ella's breath caught. Ella Martinez, you asked me to dance a year ago in a crowded nightclub because you needed someone to make your ex-husband jealous. I'm asking you to dance with me for the rest of our lives because I can't imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me? The ring was perfect, elegant and understated, a diamond that caught the light without being ostentatious. Exactly what she would have chosen if she'd been choosing herself. Yes, Ella said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, absolutely, yes. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like joy and promise and everything they'd built together. When they pulled apart, he was smiling wider than she'd ever seen. I was terrified you'd say no. Why would I say no? I love you. I want to spend my life with you. Because I'm still figuring out how to be the man you deserve. Because I still make mistakes, still operate on instinct instead of asking first sometimes. Daniel, I don't want perfect. I want you. Complicated, overprotective, slightly dangerous you. Ella laughed. Besides, I'm still figuring things out too. We'll figure it out together. Together, he agreed. I like the sound of that. They called their families that night, fielding excited congratulations and demands to start planning immediately. Maya screamed so loudly when Ella told her that Daniel had to hold the phone away from his ear. Finally, Maya shouted. I thought you two were going to live in sin forever. We've only been together 2 years, which is 2 years of watching you be disgustingly happy together. About time you made it official. Planning the wedding turned out to be surprisingly easy. Neither of them wanted anything elaborate, just their closest friends and family, a celebration of what they'd built rather than a performance for others. They chose a date in early December, exactly 2 years after Daniel had told Ella he was opening his Boston office. The ceremony was held at a small venue overlooking the harbor, the same harbor they could see from Daniel's office windows. Maria and Antonio catered, creating a feast that had guests raving for weeks afterward. Maya gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure, talking about how she'd watched Ella transform from someone who'd lost everything to someone who'd found herself. But the moment that mattered most came after the ceremony, when the DJ played the first dance and Daniel led Ella onto the floor. It wasn't the nightclub where they'd met. It was quieter, more intimate, more them. But as they swayed together, Ella closed her eyes and remembered that first dance, how terrified she'd been, how desperate, how certain that asking a stranger for help was the most reckless thing she'd ever done. "What are you thinking?" Daniel murmured against her hair. "That I'm glad I asked you to dance." "Just glad?" "Grateful, amazed, still slightly terrified that this is all going to disappear." She pulled back to look at him. "I went from having nothing to having everything I ever wanted. It doesn't feel real sometimes." "It's real. I'm real. This is real." He kissed her softly. "And you earned every bit of it, Ella. Your career, your confidence, this life we've built, you earned it by refusing to give up, by being brave enough to ask a stranger for help when you needed it. And you were brave enough to say yes. Easiest decision I ever made." They danced through 3 more songs, wrapped in each other, and the certainty that they'd found something worth keeping. When they finally rejoined their guests, Ella caught sight of her reflection in one of the venue's floor-to-ceiling windows. She looked happy, confident, completely different from the exhausted, heartbroken woman who'd walked into a nightclub 2 years ago. That woman had been invisible, forgettable, easy to overlook. This woman, Dr. Ella Vega now, she supposed, though she hadn't quite gotten used to the sound of it, was anything but invisible. She commanded rooms at the hospital, made critical decisions that saved lives, wore her strength like armor, and she'd done it all herself. With support, yes, with love and encouragement and Daniel's unwavering faith in her abilities. But the work, the growth, the transformation, that had been hers. "What are you smiling about?" Maya asked, appearing at her elbow with champagne. "Everything, nothing, just thinking about how far I've come." "You mean how far we've come? I distinctly remember having to drag you to that club." Maya clinked her glass against Ella's. "Best bad decision you ever made." "It wasn't a bad decision, it was the best decision." Ella looked across the room at Daniel, who was talking to his father with easy confidence. "I asked a stranger to dance, and he gave me my life back." "No, honey, you gave yourself your life back. He just reminded you that you deserved it." Maybe Maya was right. Maybe the real transformation had started not when Daniel said yes to that dance, but when Ella had been brave enough to ask. When she'd refused to let Jake see her broken, refused to stay invisible, refused to accept that the small, forgettable life she'd been living was all she deserved. Daniel had simply been the catalyst, the push she'd needed to remember who she was underneath all the layers of doubt and fear her marriage had built up. The night wound down slowly, guests filtering out in groups, until only their closest friends and family remained. Daniel's father pulled Ella aside before leaving, his expression serious. "I misjudged you when we first met," he said quietly. "Thought you were another person trying to get close to my son for what he could give you. But you've proven me wrong. You've made him better, happier, more human. He's made me better too. That's how love should work, isn't it? Making each other better?" "It should. It rarely does." He smiled faintly. "Take care of him. And let him take care of you. You're both strong enough alone, but together, you're formidable." "I'll remember that." When everyone had finally left, Ella and Daniel stood alone in the venue, surrounded by the remnants of their celebration. In a few hours, they'd fly to Italy for their honeymoon, 2 weeks of complete disconnection from work and responsibility and everything except each other. But for now, they had this moment, this quiet space between what they'd been and what they were becoming. "Dance with me one more time," Daniel said, pulling her close even though the music had stopped. "Like we did that first night." "There's no music." "We don't need music. We never did." They swayed together in silence, and Ella let herself feel the weight of everything that had brought them to this moment. The pain of her divorce, the desperation that had driven her to ask a stranger for help, the slow, terrifying process of learning to trust again, the distance and the challenges and the 1,000 small moments that had built something stronger than either of them could have created alone. "I love you," she whispered. "Thank you for saying yes when I asked you to dance. Thank you for being brave enough to ask." Daniel's arms tightened around her. I was just sitting there that night, watching people, thinking about how lonely my life had become. And then you appeared, desperate and beautiful, and asking me for the smallest thing. A dance. Just one dance. Just one dance, Ella echoed. That turned into everything. That turned into everything, he agreed. Somewhere outside, the city lights sparkled against the dark harbor. Somewhere in Boston, patients were being rushed into emergency rooms where doctors and nurses would fight to save them. Somewhere, people were falling in love, falling apart, making decisions that would change their lives in ways they couldn't possibly predict. But here, in this moment, Ella was exactly where she was meant to be. In the arms of a man who'd seen her at her lowest and loved her anyway, who'd pushed her to chase her dreams even when it meant sacrificing their time together, who'd transformed himself alongside her, choosing legitimacy over expedience, honesty over control, love over everything else. She'd asked a stranger to dance. He'd given her forever. And as they swayed together in the empty venue, with nothing but each other and the promises they'd made, Ella understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones made in desperation. Sometimes one impulsive moment can change everything. She'd walked into that nightclub broken and invisible, running from humiliation and hiding from her truth. She was walking out of this venue whole and seen and certain of exactly who she was. Dr. Ella Vega, critical care specialist, wife, woman who'd lost everything and built something better from the ashes, woman who'd asked a stranger to dance and found herself instead. The music had long since stopped, but they kept dancing anyway, wrapped in each other, and the knowledge that their story was just beginning. And somewhere, in a quiet nightclub across the city, other people were making their own desperate decisions, asking their own strangers for help, taking their own brave, terrifying steps toward futures they couldn't yet imagine. Ella hoped they found what she'd found, hoped they discovered their own strength, hoped they learned that sometimes the smallest acts of courage led to the biggest transformations, but mostly she just held on to Daniel and let herself be happy, because she'd earned it, every hard-won, beautiful piece of it. And that, Ella thought as her husband kissed her in the empty venue, with the city sparkling beyond the windows, was worth every moment of fear it had taken to get here, worth every second of doubt, worth everything.